Howdy y'all, Brewerdog here. This video is a 2-hour interview I had with professional Rocket League caster MachtFisch. Initially, I got this interview solely for a class project regarding the esports industry and its future. However, I think having an interview with so much insight not be public would be a shame. Plus, in my class project, I used maybe like 30 seconds of it. If you haven't already, please go check out my class project that I posted on my channel. Alright, now that the gross self-plug stuff is out of the way, I have 3 more things. First, I did interviews with Talks and Buttery Hotness, which I also plan to release. If you'd like to see those, consider subscribing so you can catch them later. Secondly, I did not mute my Discord notifications, so every now and then you will hear a Discord DM sound. Please check the video first so that you don't go crazy when you hear this sound. Lastly, about 15 seconds of info have been cut from the interview simply for things such as places where people live and work, and there are some cuts to reduce the amount of silence between sentences. With that being said, here's a whole interview I had. Please enjoy. I don't have any like formal introduction, so
Yeah,
whenever you're
just go
ready,
for
I'm
it.
gonna start with the first question, general questions, work down to more specific, and then eventually
Mhm.
to like the rating. Some of the questions I have may not be on here. I may come up with questions depending on how the conversation develops, just so you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah,
So,
of course.
with that being forward, I'm going to ask the first question I have, and very generic. How has the esports industry changed since when you first started?
Well, first of all, I started in 2020. Like I competed on the grassroots level, like really amateur level in 2018, and I started entering the esports scene like properly, I'd say about 2019, 2020. And that was obviously when COVID just started to be a thing, right? And of course, during that time, it was massively inflated overall, because people were just at home, people needed content, people needed something to watch and to do, and those that were already that had more of an affinity for the online world, they definitely flocked to esports for good entertainment value. So everything was inflated, viewership was inflated, sponsorship was inflated. It was a bubble, and that bubble is now bursting. It is now much more a callback to reality where companies don't get sponsored by venture capitalists like all over the place, so they don't have infinite money they can literally just burn and throw away. They have to now actually budget and have to actually work with the money they have. So I think we're now in a point where esports turns from just this overinflated thing that definitely helped it grow to becoming more sustainable and to becoming more business savvy, I'd say.
Yeah, I agree. You're also probably one of the first people I've had whose first answer to that question was the COVID boom in esports, and just
I mean,
trying to
depends
make
on
a comment.
how long people have been around, right?
Well, I
Like,
mean, like,
if someone's been around since like the beginning of StarCraft 2, then they're gonna have an entirely different opinion.
yeah, yeah. The people I've interviewed so far was assistant coach and analyst for Fury Up Under Hotness. Is it Achilles or Achilles? I don't know how to pronounce it because I see the EAS, and all of a sudden I'm starting to panic. But Achilles, I was able to just not an call interview, but they were
Mm-hmm.
willing to just answer some questions over text. So
Mm-hmm.
I got that with Achilles, and then Talks was the most recent one, and then he shot me your way.
Oh yeah, Tox is definitely a good one. He's quite well spoken.
Going on to the next question.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is kind of different because you're a caster, and I'm not sure how exactly it kind of works for a caster.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what are the benefits of being signed to an organization in esports? I know with casters, it'd be like you get on the roster for RLCS, like EU and A,
Mm-hmm.
but what is the benefits for a caster being signed? And I guess how exactly do you get signed to an organization?
I mean, I can answer this from 3 different perspectives. I can answer this I'm gonna answer all of them anyway. From the manager's perspective, from a player perspective, and from the caster perspective. I would say, most importantly, first of all, from the player perspective, I think it's the biggest thing because you get rid of so much financial volatility, and you can actually do esports as a living. I don't think you can do esports properly as your main job without being signed to an organization and having a consistent salary. I think organizations for pros, they're everything. Being able to be in an organization, have that financial security, that's At least from my point of view, that would be the best thing as a pro. As a manager, it's sort of the same. You can't do like the whole managing gig without full time without being assigned to an org, because as a manager, you get even less than players. You don't even get a share of the prize money. You're literally doing it voluntarily. So for those two sides, being part of an org is the sort of sign that you made. Like, especially if you're talking like big RLCS level, is the sign you made it. Like, you got to an org, you're there, you get your salary, you can have your income stream, and then you can like work really professionally and really dedicate a lot of your time to it. For a caster, it's different. While there are casters that are being signed to organizations, they are mostly signed as content creators with the add-on of them being just a community figure and a caster, right? If for example, you take Hercules, she is signed to Cloud9, but more in the role of content creator rather than a caster. But that being said, if you are signed to an org, or if you are, let's call it, affiliated with an org, it's also really good. Because you know that whenever that org's going to have a stream, you're going to be on it. And again, that's more consistent money. And in this entire industry, what it really boils down to is making the step from freelance or semi-pro to pro. Being and I define pro as really being able to live off of it, to have no need for any secondary income stream. That for me is when you can pay all your bills, you don't need anything. That for me is when you're professional. And for that instance, being affiliated with an organization is huge, because you get a steady stream of work. There is something you can fall back on and you can rely on, and you're not necessarily being restricted to hoping that the multitude of agencies that have you in their database actually reach out to you. So I'd say being with an org is the best thing. Like, the main benefit is just financial security. And then, of course, for players, like, there's a lot more, like, with working with psychologists, boot camping and all that stuff. But that doesn't really apply for casters.
I guess so financial security, I guess.
Mm?
Would you say that applies the same for pros and coaches? Like, if you're
Oh
financially
yeah,
stable
100%.
to pursue esports based off finances, you'd be considered a pro?
For me, at least, yes. I mean, there are other people that have different interpretations of what it means to be professional. There's the technical definition of you're professional when you make money in a professional manner, and it doesn't matter how much money that is. And while that is certainly true to an extent, for me, a true professional does this as their full-time gig. For example, there are coaches out there that are currently not signed to an org, but get by being content creators in the meantime between org contracts. They are still, in my eyes, they are still being professional. They're still counted as professionals as long as they can get their next contract sorted.
Do you think like placements also play into for players and coaches too? Like placements, like top 16
Yeah,
RLCS would also consider somebody a pro?
yes, definitely. But for me, really, the distinction becomes if you're constantly being signed to orgs. For example, like Tox is a great example, right? He
Yeah,
is
the
on that
long
level
list.
where he's like, I would say he's comfortably top 6 EU, like in terms of teams. But what he also does, he always gets an org. And that for me is the difference between a pro and someone that's just a very, 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 very high level of semi-pro. Someone that constantly gets orgs has got inherent value to an org, and when it comes to performance targets. So that for me is someone that would be a pro.
I like that answer because I know like usually you'll see people say like what determines a pro, and well, I mean, I never really guess consider like being able to do this as a full-time job would make somebody a pro, especially because, in early 2010s,
Mhm.
professionals would go do like an office job, and then on the weekends they go to like Orlando, Florida to play in like a Call of Duty LAN or something like that.
Yeah.
And usually you see like debates in the esports area, it's like what determines a pro? Well, it's top 16 RLCS. If you qualify for this major in Counter Strike, if you make the Call of Duty League in Call of Duty. But I guess what kind of gets left behind is that people often forget that when you're tier 2 and below, you can't really safely pursue esports unless you have a big content following and then your content brings in
Yeah.
enough money that you can keep pursuing it.
Yeah, I mean, that really hits. The thing is, I come from a business background, right? Um, so for me, it is just natural to think first of all in monetary terms, right? And that's obviously going to be my unique bias, I guess, that I bring in. Is that with that business background for me, money has probably a more of a higher standing than other stuff. So while like if you say in the 2010s, like for example, like the COD pros or the melee players that were like, if you take for example a Hungrybox in melee, that was like in 2012, 2013, that was winning all the tournaments everywhere basically, but he still had his like normal day job. For me, he's a very very successful competitor, a very successful player, but if he needed that day job to make ends meet, he wasn't a true professional.
I'm
Like
gonna
in the narrowest word, in the narrow sense of the word, really.
I'm gonna go on to the next question, and you kind of
Yeah.
already answered it with the first one, and it's also kind of hard to hit a nail with this question. But what are some current trends in esports, and what are some previous trends? I think when I think about trends personally, I think about how there used to be team houses, and you'd
Mhm.
buy a house and you have your team of that house to compete together, kind of like a boot camp, but more personal in a way. Is there anything that kind of extends from that? Not exactly like a boot camp or like a team house that you can think of.
I mean, most orgs these days will make sure that they have facilities in very vague terms where their players can boot camp, but or train together. Let's put it that way: train together. And I think that's a great step. I think that's a good step. I mean, if we see what's going on in France, Carmine Corp has got their own arena. Vitality is building their own complex. Um, in France, they are really on the up and up when it comes to professionalizing and I guess getting things centered around their headquarters with events and with like that sort of infrastructure behind. I really like that trend. Um, what I also like and what I alluded to earlier is that I like the trend that it's becoming more monetarily sustainable. Obviously, esports is still a mostly cash negative business, but there are certain ways for organizations to make money, and there are certain ways where you can actually profit off having a team and still pay the players a very good wage. So that step towards economic sustainability and economic sensibility is quite a trend for me that I really like.
That's interesting because a lot of people, when kind of like I ask how organizations monetize, the first thing they talk about is content. But with
Mhm.
it, kind of sounds like what you're saying is that property is becoming an asset to esports organizations because of the facilities they built, and
Mhm.
they could loan out this asset to other teams. So
That as well, yeah. But content obviously is a big one. I omitted that completely, but content obviously is the big one because the way that marketing works is obviously you have to, when you have your sponsors, you need to give them communication occasions. And you need to be able to say in your contract, okay, I've signed this RLCS team. During 2025, we're going to have 40, 50, 60 posts or 60 communications with your name, with your brand logo in that communication. Right? And that is through content of any kind, be it just a poster or just a still image, or be it content in the more, I think, modern sense of it being like video content, in whatever facet that may be.
I guess
And
like
that's definitely like a big revenue stream for orgs.
kind of forgot like Furia Esports, even though they're Brazil owned. I think I realized 22-23 that they had a facility in Florida, and that was probably extremely
I don't know.
helpful not only for the players but the team as a whole, and even Furia reaching their American audience too.
Mm, yeah,
So
definitely. I mean, you just need to be like, that's the same with like traditional clubs, right? You need a home base. You need somewhere to be, well, physically, in order for them to engage with them.
Moving on from, kind of gonna cycle into something completely different and more kind of based on the game itself instead of just organizations. But are game developers harming the influence and growth of their esports? There's a lot of talk about Rocket League and how the advertising sponsorship work on car decals, but another title that's also kind of having issues with the developer is Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike is taking out the RMR system, which was more of like an open qualification that you see in RLCS, where you just sign up on a page and you just run through it. But this major is the final major they'll have with open qualification, and it's going to move to a new point-based system using a algorithm that Valve has made themselves. Do you think that stuff like this, or in general that game developers harm the growth of their esports and the influence it could have on a player base?
I mean, we have to separate, I think, between the actual game developers, i.e., the people that do the coding and all that stuff, versus the commercial rights holders and the people that do the esports side, because those are two very separate parties with, I think, very separate interests. As for the game devs themselves, the game devs proper that do the coding, I don't think I don't think they care in the growth of the esport. They might, personally, but on a professional level, I don't think they care that esports is a thing or that it exists. They're just happy that people play their game, and they try to improve their game as from a technical point as much as they can. As for the commercial people, and I think that's more where you're heading with this question, they are oftentimes between a rock and a hard place, I feel like. They are very, very dedicated people that sometimes just want to try things as well, because it's natural. Like, you have a system for like 10 years or however long. You have a system and it feels stale, so you want to try something. You want to innovate. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And I think no one from any game company that has anything to do with the esports side wants to intentionally kill the esport. I think that's an assumption that, or is an inherently bad actor. I think that's an assumption that gets thrown around a lot in social media, especially on Twitter.
Yep.
But I don't think that's true. Like, some people are just inept at their job. Granted, they're just not fit for the role they're in. 100%. Some people are just bad at their job. But I wouldn't say if you're working on the esports team, you're putting in changes because you think it will actively hurt it. You're putting in change because you're, well, at least on average, you think that it helps the esport, and it could be a fun new way to engage new audiences in the esport. I think that's more of my lens. So I don't think they are, if they are harming it, if their actions are harming the esport, I don't think it's by design. I think it is mostly by accident.
I mean, that is a pretty fair assumption too, because esports, I mean, like, let's just say, like, the godfather of esports, Counter-Strike, kind of where it all started. It started like late 90s, I'm pretty sure, at least like the competitive scene with the internet cafe boom in EU.
Yeah.
And Rocket League esports is about 8 years old.
Yeah, 2016.
A lot of kind of like plumbing and tweaking and stuff you have to do to kind of find the right mix with it. And a lot of the changes we'll probably see because of how young the esport is, even though, 8 years seems like a long time. But if you want to compare it to general sports like the NFL and MLB, that stuff's over a century old.
Yeah.
And they've had a lot of changes, and even they're still making changes today about how the game is played, but I guess not really about the format. But because of how young esports is, we're probably seeing these changes mainly because it's kind of a very new field, depending on the game you choose.
I mean, that's also a very interesting take, I feel like, because if you look at it, even like football or soccer, they're still tweaking rules. They can't tweak, then they stop tweaking the game at the core because they're quite happy with the game at the core. But even that took like 50 years until like something like offside was introduced, or goalposts were up, or like there was a netting. behind the goals, like trivial stuff today that we think like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That took like time. That took like 20, 30 years until those sort of quote unquote innovations were made. It's just that esport is such a new industry and such a diverse industry because esports isn't equal to esports, right? Every game has its unique kinks and stuff like that. That we're just having the same baby problems that those traditional sports did back in the day. But the difference is, with the power of social media, we all get to see the evolution steps that this takes. Whereas in the 1890s, when soccer was, becoming a bigger thing, no one saw that. Or it was relatively on a more local basis rather than all across the world. So I think there's also an aspect of that playing in that, yes, it is changing, but it is changing because it needs to change. It's just that there are millions and millions and millions of eyes on it whilst it is changing.
I mean, end of the day, too, the sport industry in general is just a part of the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
And what the event planners and the league organizers' main goal at the end of the day is to try and create the most entertaining program they can to bring in the most amount of revenue. And so when these tweaks come out, these changes come out, it's them trying to figure out a different way to put their program at the front of the table, at the front of the TV screen, wherever they go.
Exactly. Couldn't agree more.
That's all I had for, I guess, just like general questions about trends in esports. Now I'm going to go into like more specific questions, kind of talking about pathways and connections and maybe a little bit about how you became a caster manager yourself. But the first question I have, and to be specific, is what's a pathway someone needs to take in order to become a professional caster in esports like you have?
Well, you ask me. I mean, on my definition, I'm not even a professional.
Well, I mean, I saw your reel on Twitter, and I'm like, okay, this guy's good. And
thank you, mate.
Your page, you have a lot of different parts, especially on Wikipedia. There's a lot of regionals I see you cast in. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, like, I mean, the pathway, it just starts like with everything, right? It starts because it's fun. For me personally, it started with a bet I lost. It was 2020. It was like March or April 2020. So just at the beginning of COVID, right when the first lockdowns were happening, and me and my mates, who I was teammates with in the amateur playing in the amateur league, like playing, we were watching a stream, and I was so pissed at the person commentating it. I don't remember who it was. I don't remember the stream I watched or whatever. I was so pissed because, well, I watched a lot of football or soccer growing up, as is the course in Germany, and I always liked listening to the commentators and pointing them out on bullshit they were talking. Oh, by the way, I hope I can swear. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. It's a college level class. I think there's several times where drugs just get joked about.
If there are any complaints, please send them my way.
I got no issues. You can just blur them out. It's not an issue. Post production has it.
Okay, I'll try not to though.
Fine.
But I like to call them out, right? Whenever they get something wrong, or I feel like no, that wasn't the case. So I was doing that. I was maybe just having a bad day overall, and one of my mates was like, "If you critique them so much, you go and do it then, mate." And I was like, "Okay, betcha." And then we took a bet on something, I think on game score, because I thought I knew everything, and I lost the bet. And as a man of honor, you honor the bet. And the bet was I have to apply to the community league where we were playing to try out casting. Having done nothing of the sort whatsoever, ever in my life. Like, the most I did was some public speaking classes at high school. like that's it. And like some model UN. So I know how to speak with a microphone in front of me, but that's about it.
Well, I mean, like, especially like the art communication classes, like you can plan everything out, but like
Yeah,
In
exactly
professional
right.
sports, it's so fast
You
paced. You
can't.
gotta think fast enough to keep up
Yeah,
with the game too.
yeah, exactly. Right. So nothing like I know what it's like to speak into a microphone, but that's about the best preparation I had. So I went in there and I just absolutely loved it. And I think that is a prerequisite for, especially if you are in a creative industry. I think that is a prerequisite. That you need to be loving what you're doing, because it's not just going to be fun. It's going to be in fact, it's going to be very frustrating most times, rather than being fun. So I think if you come from that place, that is the way forward. So go from the community league and just build your profile. Just treat every cast like it's the one opportunity that might get you spotted by someone, because someone is always watching. You might not know it, but someone is always watching. For me personally, I had and what really helped for me in the beginning was I immediately got a lot of positive feedback from like the players that I played against at that point for 2 years, and they were like, "Holy, you're not bad at you're not bad at that. That was really enjoyable to listen to."
Yeah.
And that like positive feedback, if you get it, you have to savor it, because you're not gonna get it a lot, especially in casting. Feedback is rare. You really have to chase people around for it. But yeah, so that's how it all starts, and that's like the sort of the ground level. There, go to the grassroots scene, go to some community league, and be like, "Hello, I've never done this before." Because community leagues are always looking for casters, right? They
Yeah.
always want casters, and they don't care if you don't have any experience. They take you anyway. So that is how I started, and then over time, I got a few connections. Then I started in English, in fact, and then moved to German casting
Oh.
whilst doing the English casting on the side. I then moved to the Germany's highest division. So then I made myself a name in Germany, and also in like a very sort of not really that small, but also very small-ish community in Europe. And then you have to get lucky. And then it's literally about as soon as you're on a certain level, and you feel really comfortable with yourself, and you bring energy into it, and you do the preparation, and you are acting as if you were a professional, and then you just have to get lucky. For me, it was a DM at like 9 in the morning. Yo, I need someone to cast OCE RLCS tomorrow at 7 a.m. or whatever. And that was sent into a group chat, into a server with like in the production chat of a server where 30 people were. And I was simply the quickest to answer.
Oh, hell yeah.
I was simply the quickest to say, "Hell yeah, sign me up." And that's the start. And that's how I got my first RLCS cast. And then it went a bit mad.
A bit
And then I
mad.
got RLCS. Then I got RLCS cast offers in Europe over a different scene, because I also joined the collegiate scene at that time.
Mhm.
And someone had a date clash, and they were like, "Yo," so a mate of mine was just having a date clash, right? So he couldn't do both. So he had to prioritize his IRL thing, but he needed a replacement for an EU RLCS stream, and he was like, "Yo, mate, you've got time this Friday," and I was like, "Hell yeah, gimme." um, and that's how you build, and then you're in the fold, and then you get to know some people, and then you can always link back to, "Hey, I've already done RLCS work. I've already done RLCS work in Europe." Like OCE and APAC and all the minor regions are fine. They're good for building your like confidence and building your talent and getting yourself a Wikipedia page. But if you can point to European or North American cast, that is for a stream, and for a team that you streamed, and for an org even, that is brilliant. And then you can really slide into the Twitter DMs of people that are, or for like RLCS team, they're like, "Hey, we're looking for a caster." And then you can slide in like, "Okay, yeah, hi, I'm this guy. I've casted this team. Here's the VOD. Want to do it?"
So a
and then
lot
and
of
that's
portfolio
and
building, essentially.
yeah, a
And
lot of portfolio
also
building,
a little bit of luck and maybe staying up later than you should
of
just in
course.
case a message pops
Yeah,
out.
oh,
I like
100%.
I like the
Like
fact you brought up
it's mostly luck. It is. It is mostly luck because there's so many good people that don't get noticed simply because, or don't get the opportunity simply because, well, there's a limited number of spots, right?
Mhm.
Like, I think it might sound arrogant, but I think it's fair to say that for me personally, I'm very comfortably tier 2 in Europe. But to be tier 1 or to get the chance to even cast with some of the tier 1 people, you just need hella luck. Like, because you know you're good and you know you're maybe even as good as they are. Maybe, I mean, you think yourself that you're better than them, of course. But, like, you think you're as good as they are, and you just need to wait patiently, biding your time, really. Do as many cool events as you can in the meantime. Keep building that portfolio, and eventually that email is gonna come.
I know especially college clubs cuz I'm from we don't have an official club, really anything. We get maybe 3 grand a year from our student government to support our club, and especially the esports clubs by themselves who get minimal support are always looking for casters too. And I
Yeah.
learned that my last semester when I was social media manager because we had a Valorant team, and I think 2 weeks in the semester I learned the Valorant team is actually really fucking good, like really
Mhm.
good for the division they play in. But we had 0 people who kind of played Valorant or like watched it, and 0 people who had the ability to stream it. So as social media manager, I decided because this team needed to be seen because I
Mhm.
couldn't believe what they were doing. So I started streaming them, broadcasting them, and I had zero experience, and it was so refreshing to get comments from them because first of all, you'll learn right away when teams don't get production, they're super appreciative of every opportunity they get when they
Yeah.
broadcast. Even if it's just like no commentary at all, being able to have their games broadcasted live is an experience itself that they will always appreciate. And secondly, they're gonna always watch back the VOD no matter how badly you mess up.
Yeah.
Maybe you forget to turn on your mic for the first 2 games, and then the third time it comes around, it's like, oh my
Oh,
god.
we've all been there. We've
I've
all been there,
been
haven't
there a
we?
lot. Or maybe like with me with Valorant, I thought I knew Valorant, and then I started casting it, and it's like I do not know the map callouts. I don't know the attacker defender side. I don't know what agents to pick. So I ended up talking to our players a lot, so I understood. Okay, this map is this sided. You have this player composition for this reason, and especially like working for looking for work the first time, you get a lot of help from just the players
Mhm.
themselves from the college scene because they want to be seen, and what you do is allow them to be seen.
I mean, yeah, there's definitely an interplay there. I mean, collegiate is completely at a different level in the States that rather than it is in Europe, where honestly most universities don't give a shit. I'm sorry. Uh,
Yeah.
but they couldn't care less. Like, for example, Berlin, the Technical University of Berlin got top 8 of CRL Worlds last year in 2023. I'm very sure the Technical University of Berlin doesn't even know it has a Rocket League team. Never mind one that is a multiple time German champion, multiple European champion, and a top 8 world's level team. Like, I'm very positive that if you rang them up and asked them, they wouldn't know.
Like Texas
Because
A&M
it's.
Valorant too, because they're a club and they won the national championship and they could even buy the trophy. And as soon as that
Oh.
came out, because it's America and it's Texas, so the
Mhm.
big thing in Texas and America is of course American football. So when that came out, it's like, wow, we're an esports university now. That's where our funding went, and the players themselves probably paid for all their gear and the travel fees just to get to that tournament.
Yeah, okay, that's wild.
Hmm.
That is wild. Yeah, but like again, coming back to like that's just how it is. And players are like to add on to that, players are like, especially like lower level players, they are super happy for being on stream. Like they like to be showcased. Like even the pros. And once you casted some of the pros, I mean, you could there was an event 2021. There was my first LAN I went to, like a year and a bit into casting. I went to my first LAN in Germany, and I knew, of course, the players that were going to be there. I knew the players because I've done my prep, but I've casted them before.
Mm-hmm.
But you could tell that they didn't quite know me because I was still like the up and coming caster. Fast forward 1 year, 2022, same event, different players, same event. So again, like a convention in Austria, and it was suddenly as if I was part of them, just because it was one more year where I'd made my name in the scene, and like it switched up so much, like it switched up completely. And the players, and if you are at that stage with the players, they are very happy to help you out, like tactically as well, like to just deepen your understanding of the game, because the players also have an interest to have more people from the same nation or from the same background be successful in the game, because that drives the game forward in your own country, right? There's a give and take there.
Well, I mean, like, especially like esports, you kind of do it for pride until you reach,
Mhm.
like, you're finally able to get some money out of it. Like, there's
Oh yeah,
not
100%.
a lot of monetary you can get out of esports, especially at the lower levels, and especially when you start up in org, you probably won't see a return on interest being a business owner in esports till like a decade later. There's a lot of pride that go into esports, and you can kind of see with the FIFA World Cup, FIFAe World Cup, and the NAE debate, the French domination, that esports is a very prideful state-based thing.
Mm. No, especially like at the very top, like. But also to come back to the point, what you said earlier, like esport, you don't make money. I would say, like, if you're doing well, you do get money like 2 or 3 years in, or you can make money depending on how you structure your business. But
It's extremely
for a lot of
challenging.
players and for a lot of players and casters and managers and coaches, there's a lot of hard work that simply isn't going to be paid. Like, especially if you're on the up. The first time I ever had a paid gig was like 1.5 years. That was like, I did 1.5 years entirely on voluntary basis before I got offered my first paid gig.
That sounds pretty lucky, actually.
It depends as well, right? I think there are people that will tell you, oh, you should never work for free. And I'm like, well, if you're just starting out, yes, you should. Because you're asking for someone for experience.
Mm-hmm.
And you're asking mostly people that don't have any money that would need to otherwise pay out of their pocket to pay you. And I don't think that's right.
Yeah, I agree.
That's a belief.
Like, if I asked to get paid Cast of Valor for the first time, and I didn't even know like what A long was, a lot of people would probably be pissed.
Yeah.
And that's very understandable, because they could easily find someone else who do it for free, and they have played the game since beta, but they want to be a caster.
But it's also important to know, like, when you can make the step from, okay, I'm now at a level where I can demand some money at least.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you escalate how much your hourly rate or your day rate or your whatever is, based on the experience and the events and the companies you've worked with are. And you also base it on, like, who wants to hire you.
I guess it's kind of a great way to segue into the next question, and I'm not sure if you feel comfortable asking it, but I decided to ask this question anyway. What is the process like for getting paid as a caster? Because is it kind of similar to a player where you just kind of send a few emails and it's like, hey, there's this cast price, send us your information? Is it work basically like that, I guess? I guess I actually didn't know how the process of getting paid as a player works, now that I'm speaking out about it, but...
I mean, as a caster, you work on a project basis, right? So you're being hired to do X amount of work. For example, FIFAe, right?
Right.
FIFAe World Cup, like someone like Hercules, or Johnny Boy, like whoever, one of the casters there, they're going to be reached out to by an agency, or an agency is going to reach out to their agent. But like, let's get agents out of the way. Like, someone is going to reach out to the caster. And then there's an email exchange, and there's a call of like, okay, hey, yeah, I'm interested. Yeah, it works like date-wise, it works for me. And then they ask you the big question, and the big question is always, what's your day rate? And what's your rate? And then you're like, okay, now there are several things going on in your head. First of all, everyone has his set day rate. You can ask I think as soon as you're tier 2 at the latest, you should have a set day rate where you're like, okay, you can sort of pivot around that. So someone would be like, okay, what's your day rate? And then you're like, okay, I want to leave a bit of negotiation room, and whatnot. So you tell them a number. Let's just say $2,000 per day, plus $1,000 plus half of a day rate for each travel day, because that is also at the higher level. If you do travel days because you're being booked for a LAN, that is opportunity cost. That is a day where you would otherwise be able to work or stream, for example,
Right.
but that just gets lost. Hence why the person that wants to book you also needs to pay your opportunity cost of traveling to and from the event. Plus, of course, like hotel and everything is always, like, hotel and travel costs are always included. Like, you never pay them out of your own pocket as a caster. And I really believe that you shouldn't.
How, like, when you started out, like, because you basically started as freelance, how do you figure out a day rate as a freelance person with no prior experience?
You talk to the people. You talk to people. You talk to your peers. Like, you will know, because along your way you will work with a lot of different people, and if you're smart, you're gonna connect with these people, and either you connect with them on a more business level or on a more friendship level. Like, that's all dependent of, like, how friendship works. If the two of you sit in the call and sit in the booth and really vibe, then it might be a good indication that you just vibe as people as well. So you naturally talk to each other, and you may or may not naturally end up being friends. So whilst they are also your competition, and that's what makes casting really weird, they are your competitors, but they're also your friends. So you can really ask them about, like, these very personal topics like payment, and, like, what do you're at a, like, similar level, or I know that you're a step above me or, like, a step below me, but, like, what's your rate? And then you sort of base it around other people and check, okay, what have they done before, with how many companies have they worked with, and, like, how big of a company have they worked with before, and then you sort of dial it in. And then there are people that are not going to pay your rate, and that's fine. And that's something that is, on the flip side, that's something that you have to be able to let go. Is if for example, if you ask me now, can you cast this Rocket League event for my uni? And I'm like, sure, but okay, how long is it going to be? And we say, okay, it's like 6 hours, so I'm going to charge you my day rate. My day rate is 600 euros. And you're like, no, we can't have that. I'm like, okay, I can go down to 500, but that's really it. And then, like, still it's too expensive. I'm going to have to say, I'm sorry, no. Right? Because you don't want to also volunteer your time too much. Because then there are other people, because then you could need to think about, okay, there are other people below me on the ladder that would happily work for $300. For them, it's a good deal because they're less experienced. So they are naturally cheaper, but you're also going to not get as good a product as you would have gotten with me. But that's fine. That is something that, yeah, you as a caster have to get, like, also have to consider while doing the negotiation. And then afterwards, as in, like, getting paid, it's very simple. You mostly have a contract. So you will either sign a contract, or there will be some sort of written email agreement, because that is enough. Also, that also constitutes a contract. If you say, I offer, this is my offer, and they say, yeah, cool, you're booked, that is enough to be enforceable. And so you have a understanding with the person that hired you, and then after the event is done, you simply send them an invoice, and then hopefully they pay you within 30 days.
Oh god. Yeah, there's horror
most of
stories in
them
esports.
do. To be fair, yeah, esports, but, like, maybe I'm just lucky of having
I've
mostly
seen some
European
casters
clients.
have like a
Oh
public like
yes,
Google Sheets
yeah.
too.
Like, I'm very lucky in that regard. I've got, I would say, 95% of my clients are exceptionally well when it comes to payment. Like, they are not just paying net 30 or like within 30 days, they're mostly paying within 2 weeks. Like I'm very, very fortunate in that. But there is also the flip side of there are a lot of unserious people. So what I like to do, I hate being paid late because it's like, come on, man. Like if there is good communication as to why they can't pay right now, I'm more lenient. But I'm gonna ask for interest. I'm going to send reminders, and
I've never even
as
considered
in
added interest. That's kind of
and as in any other business, it is completely normal if a bill is not paid to ask for interest on that bill. Yeah, it's a completely normal business transaction. How, like for example, if you don't pay your carpenter on time, he sends you a bill. You don't pay him within 30 days, and he sends you a reminder. And then there's a second reminder, and the second reminder has got a little interest added onto it, right? That is completely normal. No one would bat an eye. But in esports, apparently, it's unacceptable. I don't believe that, so I send invoices that have added interest on them. And if need be, and the escalation goes, okay, there are going to be 2 invoices with higher interest on them. And then if they still don't pay, then you can make it public unilaterally. And if they then ignore your communication or don't communicate with you, then you can escalate it by making it public. And the final escalation, as always, is get a lawyer and sue them.
ouch. Kind of hope it never goes public, though, don't you?
I mean, normally once it gets public, you get the support, and then they pay you quite quickly. You're mostly not going to get hired again from that company. But
do you really want to get hired again if that's how
exactly,
they
that's the flip
handle
side.
their money
That's
like
the
that?
flip side. If I was to, because I've seen a lot of my colleagues work with these sketchy companies, I've moved to, if someone like that asked me to work for them, I'm like, hey, fine, but 50% upfront. Because that's all you can, because you're a freelancer, right?
Right.
You're working for yourself. You can just set your payment schedule. And if you're working with someone that is very unserious in the way they handle their payments, you can be like, okay, I want 50% upfront. And if they don't agree to it, then it's their problem. It's not mine, because your time is more valuable than running around after a bill that you're not dedicated. That there's a 2-month delay on payment.
I'm gonna pull it back to kind of a point you made earlier, and you talked about the connections and kind of like the friendships you built along the way. Would you say like the biggest part of finding opportunities in esports is the connections you make through your work opportunities and the buddies you find while playing the game?
Not necessarily while playing the game, but while working with them at the same event at random. But yeah, like you can always hope for an agency to reach out to you, that an agency that does a cool event and they reach out to you. That obviously that would be sweet. But in actual fact, a lot of the work comes down to being recommended by someone. For example, if people come to me and be like, we have an event and we need someone, I'm like, okay, cool. What's the sort of budget looking like? I can, depending on what it is, I can give you recommendations of 2 to 6 people that can and would be willing to work the event. So having the network and actively recommending people is a big bonus, definitely. Because it's always going to come back to you, right? If you go to an event and you recommend someone, because the first message that person is always going to say to your friend is like, yo, by the way, MachtFisch recommended you. Here, we've got this event. Would you be interested? And the first thing you get is an instant, cheers, mate. Cheers for recommending me. And I believe that is good karma, and that will come back to you eventually. So yeah, network is like extremely important.
Right.
It's not, and there's also not just friends. There are some people that personally I don't really vibe with. I vibe with them in the booth as professionals, and I really like them as professionals, like doing their job, but as a person, I would be like, what are you doing, man? Like, who are you? No, I don't wish to spend time with you, but I can respect you being a very, very good professional, hence why I'm going to recommend you. And that also needs to be like, that's also part of the truth. Like, you have to very much differentiate between, yeah, they're your mates or you're your work colleague, but you have to be, because if you're recommending someone, you have to be 100% sure that they deliver, because you don't want to be the guy that recommended someone that was doing a terrible job.
That's a pretty fair statement. I'd say I agree with that. Well, I mean, like, if you give someone who's not doing their job right, then your professionalism and your ability to
Yeah,
produce
exactly.
yourself also comes in question too.
Exactly. It's right. Okay, why did you recommend us that guy? He was total rubbish. And you're like, well, you can never say normally he's better, because even though you are human and your performances as a caster especially are, I think, very much fluctuating on the day, you should recommend someone that has a decent enough floor that it will still be a good product at the end. Because at the end, as a caster especially, you just provide soundtrack. It is my firm belief you're an entertainer and you provide the soundtrack to the
Yeah.
epic things that people are doing on the screen. So if you mess up, it's like if Hans Zimmer suddenly wrote the wrong note in his soundtrack. Everyone would be like, "Hold on, that didn't sound nice. Why was it in there?" And that's the same thing. That translates 100% into casting.
I had a lot of questions, kind of caster based so far. I'm probably gonna pull it back, maybe a little bit player based with the next question. And
Hmm?
again, you did answer this like the first question. You did answer it basically, but I'm still gonna ask it anyways. Has the cost per player increased significantly or too much?
Oh, 100%, yeah. Well, both significantly and, in my opinion, too much. It becomes too much when an org such as BDS, that has won the Esports World Cup and the RLCS World Championship in the same year, has to release their roster because it's too expensive, because they don't have enough return. So yeah, I'd say players need to fact check themselves and to reality check themselves, and they have to take a monetary cut. They have to take a salary cut. Because, like, especially at the very, very top, what you hear from Europe is still more conservative when it comes to player salaries. Like, North
Yeah.
America is crazy. And if you don't have a title sponsor, you're not making that money back.
Even then, the teams with title sponsors couldn't even keep the team too. So
Yeah, exactly, right? Or if your title sponsor's like, okay, yeah, we can do 1 year, but like next year we're not going to do it. Good luck finding a new one. And that's why also players being available for content and all that is so important, because that just gives the org another chance of branding something and making money with it.
I'm gonna move on to the next question because that's kind of
Mhm.
the next question I already have was: is content becoming increasingly important for a player to have in order to get signed?
Yes, there's no way around it. Even if you don't like it, I mean, you don't have to. I mean, I feel like you sort of have to stream yourself at least. But you have to participate in all content. And organizations are going to, I think, going to be less lenient on that.
Especially in the upcoming future.
Yeah, especially because they know content is king, and they want to build a fan base. Content is a great way to build a fan base, because merch sales is a very big way for revenue for orgs. And also, you just want the players to not be nobodies. Like that, for example, is why the women's scene in Rocket League is struggling so much, because no one is confident enough to put their face out there in front of the camera. They're all so anxious. And that's why there's only one signed team. And guess what? The one team that is signed in Europe, well, my team, is that we are there because we're comfortable doing content with the org. We're comfortable doing content. We're streaming with face cams. Like the players are streaming. We're doing, like, when the org asks, "Oh, can we do a quick video?" Yeah, of course we can. Like, no problem. And I think that's the future. That's the future. If you like it or not, like, I'm not the biggest content guy, right? I don't like streaming. Weirdly enough. Weirdly enough, I don't like streaming on my own Twitch channel. But content is such a big thing. You have to have it. There's absolutely no way around it. You have to have it. And orgs will be forcing content on you. So you might as well do it on your own as well.
I'm gonna assume, like, especially like if you're denying your availability for content, not only like not just in an esports way, but like in a contractor way and like a professional way, like it's kind of like you refusing. It's you refusing work in a way. You know, it's kind
Yeah.
of like, let's say you get done with esports and you want to do a different job. You are kind of refusing the extra work. Does not really look good on a resume.
It's a thing of, okay, why would you intentionally hurt your chances, right? Because if let's say there are two teams, right, that are hypothetically on the same level. One of the teams, every player streams and just streams, just no content, but that doesn't move it into shorts or YouTube videos or TikToks or whatever. Just they stream and they have a bit of a following on Twitch. Even if them, let's say, just have 10,000 followers or something on Twitch.
Yeah, yeah.
Versus Team B that is maybe slightly better on the pitch, but it's not appeared in content. It's mostly faceless. They've got a few thousand Twitter followers, and that's it. Every orc is going to look at that Team B and be like, we might get better results, but we don't have anything with them. But with Team A, you might have worse results. You might also have better results. But what you have is a constant stream of content, things you can clip, things you can use as your org, things you can use in your pitch deck to sponsors being like, yo, you don't just get us playing in the RLCS, but you also can put your brand on this stream that has an average of 100 viewers. Like 100 viewers in the grand scheme of things is not a lot. It's 100, right? That's very for a sponsor. It's like, yeah, whatever. Like it's a nice have, but that's exactly it. It's a nice to have. And it's a way that they can get to people they would otherwise never be able to reach with traditional advertising. And that's the big upside. That's why you need to do content. And that's also why, but
I mean, that's also
incidentally,
kind of
when
why, like, especially, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but like, that's
don't
why
worry.
RMC just got signed, is because
Yeah.
Reddle's brand that he has, that he's also built alongside with the players he play with, but also like him willing to be a part of Team USA is what eventually is going to get him signed, or already has signed. I don't know if it's happened already. I think, yeah, it just happened. But him being so willing to be the face of Team USA Rocket League is probably one of the most important factors that got him signed to Gen G Esports.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've there was a podcast about a week ago, the roundtable discussion, where the CEO of Gen G, Arnold, was there, and he literally said, like, we were gonna sign them anyway, but this, of course, it's a huge plus to have the to have the US National Rocket League team representing your org, or your org players representing the national team, whatever way you want to pick it around. That's massive. That is like that's such a big brand, but that's also such a big brand jump for Red Bull's Magic Bear and Cheese, right? Where they can profit off of this massively. Everyone that is playing for their national team right now can brand themselves as national team player. Like, they are among the very, very few, exactly 48 people in the world in Rocket League that can say they've played for their national team in an official capacity. That is nuts. And that is a huge, huge gain for their personal brands.
I'm going to move on to the next question. This is kind of, this is based on experience, especially because, the opportunities that are provided and the technology that was available at older times compared to newer times. Would you say becoming a professional player in any esport takes longer than it has in past years because the game has developed a lot more and the style of the game has developed? Or does it take less years because of all the available information that's out there?
It's difficult to say, because I think if you're professional, no matter what era of esports you were in, and it's difficult to compare eras. I think it's always been equally as hard. I think now it's hard. I think it's been hard in the past as well. The problem is recency bias, right? Because you see Zen, for example, who is just completely nuts.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh, I'm never going to be as good as him. Well, you're most likely right. But you still can be a legitimate pro whilst not being as good as Zen. But even in the past, if you look at someone like Frenovi or Cooksier in like sort of RLCS season 1, season 2, they were incredibly good for that day in standard. And back in the day, you always also thought, I'm never going to be as good as them. And you were probably right again. So I think it's difficult and near impossible to say it's harder now than it was before. It's maybe harder in the sense that there's more competition. There are more players in general that are sort of vying to become semi-pro, pro. But with that comes the benefit that there's a lot more resources available to you. So I'd say it's not more or less difficult. It's difficult in different ways. You have to stand out more between more competition, whereas in the earlier days you didn't have as much competition. But I think the level you have to be at in terms of like percentage wise, ranking wise, compared to the others in the player base, I think that's changed very, very little. So I don't think it has become harder over the years to become a top level pro.
You know,
It's just different.
out of the 4 people I've interviewed, you're the 4th person to say the same exact thing, is that it has not changed at all. You're
That is actually interesting. That's interesting.
everyone, the coach, the journalist, the professional player, and even you all say the same 4 things. The amount of time it takes has not changed at all, barely changed at all.
Hmm?
Because
The
it doesn't
requirements
matter
may have
about the
changed, but the time
technology,
hasn't.
the eras, and the time. It still takes basically the same amount of time. But what Talks did say is that, especially in Rocket League, these older pros are retaining their status compared to, these new up and comers. Is that we're gonna start seeing these older pros stick around a lot longer, especially let's
Yeah.
just say like the cutoff. Let's just say season 6 is the cutoff. We're gonna
Yeah.
see a lot more pros who kind of started around season 6. Let's say like RLRS, eventually come up and stick around probably to. I'm probably throwing numbers out there, but maybe the 30s, especially Tox.
Mm.
Himself, he got into the limelight essentially in RLCS X and
Yeah.
has been a professional player since RLCS X. And he's probably going to stay in that position for possibly 5 more years.
If he keeps at it, if he keeps treating it professionally, yeah, 100%. You're preaching to the choir here, really. I'm one of the biggest proponents of saying age no longer matters.
I mean, it doesn't
If
matter.
you're a pro now, you can be a pro up until you're 30. If you keep the consistency up, if you keep the work spirit, work ethos up, and all that stuff, like let's take that stuff for granted. But if you're a pro now, you can stay a pro until you're 30 if you've got the right work ethic.
It's
Like
jarring to see like the
even
community
someone
of
like
Rocket League
JKnaps.
esports, because it's 13 years and up now that can
Hmm?
participate, and it's been 8 years, and it's like, oh, this guy's 20. Well, their time's numbered. But
They're washed.
you go to Counter Strike. These people are 35 and they're still signed to an org and they're still playing on their team and they're still getting a full-time job and they're over
Yeah.
30 years old. It's
Like the thing with the young guns is they're always going to be interesting because they're always going to be more mechanical than you, and I think that's something as the older guard has to accept. And I think that's something that the older guard is accepting. Look, for example, again, look at JKnaps. Like, dude's been around since RLCS season 3,
and
and
he's
he's
finally
still
hitting
making
double flipper
majors.
sets. Yep.
He's still making worlds, because I think JKnaps is possibly the one player with the single best work ethic in the RLCS, perhaps ever. To be one of the really, like, you can mention someone like Itachi in that conversation as well. Itachi, Garrett G, JKnaps, I think those sort of people. Garrett G maybe less, but like especially Itachi and JKnaps, they've been around for so long and at the very, very top level for so long that it is absolutely, they have to have the best work ethic. because otherwise they wouldn't be as good. They wouldn't have lived through 15 different metas and evolving mechanics and all that if they didn't have the drive and ethos to keep them at the top. I think, yeah, that's why those people are for me the prime example as to why the age thing is bollocks. Because at some point your skill sets change, right? Someone like JKnaps has seen tens of thousands of hours of competitive gameplay at the highest level. You can't surprise someone like him, like psychologically, you can't, because he's seen it before. He's seen everything before. There's a finite thing. There's a finite set that he can experience, and so that's where, like, of course, they're not going to be able to compete mechanically, but mechanics ain't everything.
Yeah.
It's a 3-man team, and if you just have 3 mechanical monkeys, you may come far, but you're never going to win.
You can see that also in like the Monkey Moon team, the Monkey Moon mentality is like
Yeah.
the most limited use of arrow possible too. Especially I think you can see like an exotic and Monkey Moon compared to like Zen and let's just say like let's just pick a Brazilian, but let's say like Yan or something like that.
Yeah.
How little air and I think it's like yaw. If you're talking about aerodynamics, I think it's like yaw, but the car rotation compared to the X and Y
Yeah.
axis.
Yeah.
They're winning world championships, but they have like the most dumbed down. Here is 4 ways to move the car mechanics ever, compared to these players who can. Hey, here's Cash, previous freestyler, but he can't make it to these lands.
The thing is, like, in Rocket League, while there are, of course, they are all very proficient mechanically and they are all very proficient in game sense, there are still differences. People still play Rocket League to their own style and to their own strength. You will see players be more mindful of, have better awareness, be more mindful, be more big brain. Someone like Monkey Moon, for example. If you look at his game flip, dude never flips. On his way back to defense, he never, you will very, very rarely, like only basically if he is sprinting, you will see him flip. Otherwise, he will always drive because he needs to be able, he needs to see the play develop. He needs to be able to cut in at just the right time. But because he's so big brain and he's got the best game sense out of everyone, of course he's lacking in different areas. But that's why you're a team. That's why it's not 1v1, right? That's why you're a team. And that's also why it's not 2v2, because 2s is boring. That's why it's 3s. Because it's so deep tactically that you can allow these different roles to mold on a team. You can have a Monkey Moon and a Zen coexist on the same team and use both of their strengths to your advantage. Of course, they're all insane, but they're still even more insane at some different parts. Zen is insane in the air, Monkey Moon is insane on the ground, and like from exotic is insane when it comes to positioning. Radosin is the best LAN player I think there ever is, or one of the best LAN players I think I've seen. To put it a bit more mildly, and not too much hyperbole in there. But Radosin on LAN, Radosin is the reason that this Vitality roster of 2022-2023 won the perfect split and won Worlds. Yes, Zen and Alpha were great, but without Radosin, that team falls apart.
Right.
Like, there's still different roles to have, so you can come to the top with very different approaches and still be at the top because your ground level, your base level is just so high.
I'm gonna move on to the next question.
Mm.
Got a little off track, so I'm gonna try and pull it back. So kind of about like how players compete and the mentalities they have. But is boot camping or having a team house beneficial to rosters and their performance?
Yes. Short answer, yes. Boot camping especially. I mean, there was a big debate as to why Europe is consistently beating North America, and most people pointed to boot camps. In Europe, it is standard for organizations to when it's game time, you are sitting next to each other because it's completely different sitting next to each other rather than just being in a Discord call or TeamSpeak. It's a complete different feeling. You've got your teammate with you. You can help each other a lot more being in a close physical vicinity rather than being far away. I think there probably even are some psychological studies to back this up. If you look for one, you'll find one, I'm sure.
I'll have to talk to Prof. Yeah,
Yeah.
hit up a sports site, Prof.
I'm sure he can provide you with something. But yeah, boot camps I think very very beneficial. As for team house, I'd say there's an argument, but the thing is, you're three people, right? So naturally, it sort of boils down in a 2 versus 2 and 1 sort of situation where 2 become really good friends and 1 is just like still a good friend,
outsider.
but like not like the outsider, right? Um, so that for me is sort of the difficulty when it comes to to team house. Also, I wouldn't want to live with my teammates. Like they are essentially, if you look at it like from a professional perspective, if you're working in like a small company, you're there during the day, but you're at your own home at night. And I
Yeah,
don't see why esports should be different.
it's
Like
a nice
even
break
football,
from
like
it.
football and soccer players, like or like baseball players, basketball players, they play a lot together and they train a lot together, they travel a lot together. But I think all of them are very glad to be in their own four walls at the end of the day and just sit on their couch and do something else rather than hang with their teammates and talk about basketball more.
Yeah,
I think that's a very, very important distinction to have between home life and work life.
to separate business and personal.
Yeah. I mean, I hate the word, but it's work life balance at the end of the day.
It is. Now, you don't really see this in Rocket League, especially, like I say this over and over again, but
Mhm.
it's new. And but also like the age limit in Rocket League allows players to go professional at quite possibly one of the youngest age we've ever seen in esports. But our academy roster is becoming an asset to esports organizations.
Depends on how the esport is set up. If, for example, if you're looking at Riot, and how they handle League of Legends, I think academy rosters are brilliant because you can test people out in a very competitive setting and you can evaluate people in a very competitive setting, but you don't jeopardize your own success with the top team. It's sort of like it's sort of like Formula 2 and Formula 1, right? Where you do have that feeder series coming in and where you can evaluate talent and then see if they can play with the big boys. But in Rocket League, I don't think they're an asset. I think in Rocket League they're entirely useless to have an academy team. I would never brand it as such. I would always just have if you want to have multiple teams, just have multiple teams. Give them different names, preferably not colors. um, but build an own identity around each team and don't call one of them the main team and the other one the academy team.
Yeah,
I think that's a
FlyQuest and then FlyQuest Red.
in
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, right? I mean, don't call them FlyQuest Red because that's sort of like Um, have some fun with the name. Obviously, colors are the easiest distinction, but it's the universal law of the universe where something seems sensible and it's easy to implement. It's also very boring. And I feel
Yep.
like that's the case here. And I feel like that's the case because no one is saying like, yeah, FlyQuest Red. They'd rather have a cool name to cheer for. Um, so uh, I'd say in Rocket League, with the way the esport is set up, academy teams are not an asset. They are completely useless. Another esports title, yeah, definitely an asset.
Right. I'm gonna move on to the next question that I have for
Mm-hmm.
specific before I get to the scale question. And
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting because um the support that esports sees is kind of none other from this country, especially Saudi Arabia. In a way, they're kind of carrying esports because of the support they show for the industry in general. Is there any concern about the involvement of Saudi Arabia in esports and the government that plays into it?
I mean, it's a very delicate topic. Um, and you've got very different sides that you can view this on, most of which are valid. Of course, there's the elephant in the room, is this sports washing? And 100% yes, it is. Like, no doubt about it. They're trying to up their image by being like cool and innovative and investing in new and exciting stuff. Is that sports washing? Yes, because they try to better their image. Now, having cleared that up, do I think it's a problem? No. Um, if Saudi involvement really was a deep as issue as people claim it is, then people would have boycotted the ESL since 2014 when
Yeah.
the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia was the majority or became the majority shareholder. People didn't have an issue with it, so I don't see why suddenly just because events are being hosted in Saudi, it's now all of a sudden a problem.
It's
Quite the
also
contrary. Yeah, sorry.
there's
Yeah.
there's like two things too to bring into question. One, it's life-changing money, and especially for people who do this as a job and as a business, it's very hard to turn down money that could change your life, especially if it's like your first time going to a
Mhm.
LAN event or it's your first time getting assigned to an org. Turning something down like
Mhm.
that is kind of detrimental to you. And two, how much impact do like three players have in a political standpoint or sports watching standpoint by just skipping the event? You know, it's kind of a question like how much impact do a few players have compared to if everybody did it?
I think that, again, that's very very difficult to say because you always have an impact. Like if you decide not to go, it will make waves and it is an impact. Um, even as the one or even as one team out of whatever 16 or whatever, like it does make an impact. I would say 100% it does make an impact, and it will. If that is your firm belief, then more power to you. And if you don't want to play tournaments in Saudi, then more power to you. That is your right. You can say that. Um, but at the same time, I personally, and I've worked the Esports World Cup 2023. I've worked the Esports World Cup 2024. I've worked Gamers Without Borders 2023. So I've actively taken money from ESL and therefore Saudi to work these events. And I don't see any ethical problem with it simply because they're just there to make a show and I'm not there to promote the country. I think it becomes dishonest if you promote the country in any higher way that you other than what you would normally do. Like, for example, if you post a photo at every event that you go to, like, oh, look at my hotel view, this is cool, thank you very much, at organizer, you can do the same for Saudi. It's not hypocritical. But if all of a sudden, like 10 posts, obviously paid posts, appear on your timeline where, like, oh, this country is amazing, like, it's like, okay, mate, come on, tone it down. You're there to do a job. I think that's the delicate business. You're there to do a job and you're there to provide entertainment. Who pays you at the end of the day? Some people might have ethical quirks with it, depending on the country, depending on whatever, political views, their own personality. Um, but that is their prerogative. Who am I to dictate to other people how they should see a thing? That's not how opinions work. That's not how
Yeah.
democracy works. That's not how good discussion works,
Yeah.
right? That's not how any of this works. So if people have these views, fine. They're your views. I'm not here to change them. I mean, if you don't want to event, I'm happy. I can work it. I mean, I each to their own is what I would say. And overall, do I think it's problematic? No. Also,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because Saudi is a country that if you are Saudi Arabian and you're gay, you will be, I think, stoned to death, hanged. There's definitely a death penalty on it, which is not fun, to say the least, and well,
Very
some
scary and supportive for people who are
very
part of that
scary
community.
and very scary and against basic human rights. But it's just part of Islam and part of their culture. But that doesn't apply to you as a Westerner. It is the way that most of the Middle Eastern countries have evolved, not just Saudi Arabia, but also like Qatar and Bahrain and Abu Dhabi,
Yeah, yeah.
Dubai, whatever, have evolved is that it's almost like a two-pronged thing. If you're a Westerner or you're obviously a tourist, these rules don't apply to you. Yes, you still need to be mindful of their culture. Like, I wouldn't go around and kiss a man in Saudi. That will still get you put in jail. You can possibly avoid the death penalty by just diplomacy, but that will put you in jail. And rightfully so, because they're just simply forbidden, and you have to be mindful to that. But at the same time, imagine the headlines if, for example, would be arrested at the airport in Riyadh simply for the fact that he was gay. Imagine the headlines. And once again, I come
That'd be
from
the
a business
final event
analyst.
ever host then.
I come from a business background. I do marketing. I've got a major in marketing and a major in digital business, right? And all the good work that Saudi would have done, all these really sick events they've put on, no one would touch them from a 10-foot pole because it takes one bad message to eradicate 10 years of good work. In fact, even if a trans person, for example, for the Olympic esports games that are due to be hosted in Saudi starting 2025, if women's events were to be there, depending on verification, potentially trans people could go to Saudi Arabia. And I swear to God, they are going to be the single most secure people on that planet during that time at the event. They will feel so secure because if something happens to them, it's going to blow up.
Yeah.
And Saudi knows that. And that's why those people like Noah, who's gay, who's openly gay, to go there. Because you can affect change simply by being there, by exposing someone to a different world of living. Them opening up to us with esports, yes, it's sport washing. Yes, they want to make their country look more attractive. But you can also affect change in very, very small ways doing that. So again, I'm all for Saudi hosting a lot of esports events. Let them do it. If they've got money to
They're
burn.
also really freaking good at it too, from what I've seen so far of the UCAT.
I mean, yeah, and they're also really good at hosting events. Like,
They have a whole
brother.
esports alley. I talked about it. They have a whole esports like street and alley and
Yeah, they're like Riyadh Boulevard, I think it's called. It's a sick area. Like, if they want to do it, and that's just not my opinion per se. Like, even in my team with BS Plus competition, like we've got for context, we've got an all-female team, and one of my players is trans, Slumpii, and she said she would go to. We just had that discussion yesterday. In fact, she said she would go to Saudi. Yeah, 100% she would. Why wouldn't she?
that's a good question, especially with how you brought up how the rules truly do work, and in a way, if the person disappears, that's a ticking time bomb, and
Yeah.
if something like that happens, well, then a citizen of a state just went missing, then potentially government involvement could become a thing too.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, even there was a story. I think there was it might be in Saudi, might have been in another Middle Eastern country. There was an Israeli sportsman. I don't really know which sport, and that was after Israel just started their attacks in Gaza, or the conflict flared up again, however you want to put it. That motherfucker was the single most well-protected person. He did not have a scratch on him. And even though his country and some of the allies of the countries he was there were actively fighting, that guy was protected 24/7. There was no one could get to him. Like, he had 2 beefy bodyguards at some point, and the guy was, I think, a boxer. So, good luck.
It's like an action film. Get through me, get through the guards, and you get the final boss.
Yeah. Again, I feel like a lot of it comes down to people not being able to think in a more coherent way and think in a more differentiated way. It's always black and white. It's never gray.
Yeah.
Like, yes, stuff is bad, but it's not all bad. Like, you have to be able to differentiate, okay, what is actually going on. And I feel like, I mean, the current climate in sort of all discussions, not just on social media, but like in the press and everywhere, has gone that way of me first, and it's, oh, if you're not with me, you're against me.
Yep.
But as Obi-Wan once famously quipped, only a Sith deals in absolutes. So yeah, I think if people were thinking a bit more, I think we wouldn't have a lot of the discussion that we currently do have. And yeah, But coming back to the point again, I got off topic so bad. I'm so sorry.
No. I don't
But
think
yeah,
you got off topic at all. I thought you brought up several great points, especially because the main argument with the Saudi involvement is kind of the sports wash and ethical concerns,
Mhm.
but nobody really thinks about like the actual backlash that could happen if some doomsday shit happened. You know,
Yeah.
like nobody brings
Like
up like
imagine an American national, like just an American national that plays in one of these events has got like gets kidnapped or has a scratch on them or whatever, simply because they are gay or lesbian or what or LGBT in any sort of way. Can you imagine what will ensue?
a
I'm gonna
lot of
spoil it. It's not gonna end good for Saudi Arabia. That's for sure.
maybe some oil searching. Yeah, probably.
I mean, it's
Maybe
mostly
some.
also not gonna. Yeah,
Maybe some
like
established new democracy. Oh, the oil business. Welcome to America. Yeah.
Yeah, like did someone say oil? Did someone need some freedom? Um, but yeah, no, like, and that's exactly why nothing will happen, and that's why I'm not concerned because also Saudi is not going there with an agenda to normalize their way of life.
Mhm.
Esports is and sports should stay apolitical or as apolitical as possible. I know sport isn't apolitical anymore. I think it's a big shame.
Yeah.
Um, but because sports is there to entertain and sports is there to distract. Um, but whilst it is not apolitical, I feel like Saudi is doing as much as they can as to being as apolitical as they can. I mean, even look at it. Like they're um out of the how many people are working the esports world 3, 5, 7. Out of the 9 on-screen talent for Rocket League at the FIFAe World Cup, 3 of them are women.
Yep.
And let me tell you, Saudi women, I don't think they could work those events.
No, not at all.
uh,
If they're dressed up like they are how they are, if they're dressed up like the on-screen talent, the female talent is for the stream, I'm pretty sure they're breaking more than just a few laws.
yeah, probably. In fact, very likely. So yeah, I mean, if that is not at least appeasing people, then I don't know what is.
Yeah.
And showing that you're serious about this, then I don't know what is. Like, you can demonize someone, but again, just don't be stupid in demonizing someone. Just have some common sense, and it will actually go a long way.
Of course. I'm gonna move on to the final question. It's kind of rapid
Mhm.
fire. Um, you can rate these on a scale of 1 to 10. You can describe how many years it takes for somebody to get a job or title in esports, but how hard is it for a person to become, on like a scale of 1 to 10, to become a professional player in esports?
Uh, 10 being the hardest and 1 being the easiest.
Yep.
Just so that we get the scale correct. All
Yep.
right. Professional player. 9.
Professional coach.
7.
A professional analyst.
8.
A professional caster.
Also 8.
A camera operator for the LAN audience or the in-game camera operator.
6.
The behind-the-scenes broadcaster, or I guess the simpler term, the behind-the-scenes producer for the broadcast.
9.
An esports events planner.
5.
A league organizer.
Like professional league or like community league?
Uh,
Like
profession. Let's
RLCS,
say
for example,
professional
or
league.
like
Let's say like
LCS,
tier
or
one, tier
like
two. Like, hey, this is like
okay,
ECL Pro League. Here's RLCS. Here's the Fortnite World Cup.
okay, 6. Yeah, 6. I'd say 6.
That's all the rapid fire I have. It's kind of interesting because everyone has agreed it's not a 10 out of 10. It's not a 10 out of 10 to become a professional player for toughness, but for jobs that require education, which Talks brought up when I talked to him, jobs that require kind of an education are a little bit harder. Maybe I'm saying it wrong, but he brought up the point that becoming a professional player, a caster, coach, analyst has a way more informal path
Hmm?
than becoming a camera operator because that requires education, or becoming a league organizer because of the education needed for the business side, but also like the acute experience you need, like how designated experience you need
Hmm?
to pursue a league organizer or a producer for a stream.
I get that, but I would disagree to an extent, where I'd say, for example, there is different aspects. I think there are different aspects. I think professional player is like, if you talk purely from like traditional education, so middle school, high school, college, university. Player is the easiest, right? Because you
Right.
just need to be good at game to dumb it down. Coach is slightly harder. Coach is harder because not just you don't just need to be good at game or understand the game at least at a high level. You have to have people skills. You have to have
Hmm.
psychological skills. You have to have leadership skills, right? Studying psychology, one of the most difficult study programs I think there is. In my humble opinion. Um, Definitely not an easy one if you want to do it. Again, if you want to do it properly. But you can be a coach without having a psychological background. At some point, you will need to read the relevant scientific literature. Um, Analysts and casters, sort of, yes, less formal again, but there's a lot of nuance. I think you have to have a knack for linguistics.
Right.
Especially if you're not doing it in your even if you do it in your native language, but especially if you're not doing it in your native language. Like if you're like me, for example, I'm bilingual, right? I speak German, I speak English.
Hmm.
I would say my English is pretty much on a native level. Um,
Yeah, I agree.
some may disagree, some may agree, but that's up for discussion. But you have to have a certain propensity for linguistics, and you will have to sit in front of a thesaurus and look at synonyms for hours and write them down for hours, because otherwise everything is just going to get repetitive, and you're going to have a different skill set, a basic skill set for, okay, you need to be a good public speaker, you need to be persuasive. Those are less formal skills, but just skills that you can acquire by practice.
Now let me
Whereas,
rephrase this. Like before, if like this gets released, I'm not 100% sure if what I said about talks is correct, but I do remember he brought up in his points that education does play a part in
mm,
becoming certain positions in esports. I just don't want
yeah,
like I'd
I mean,
hate if it said
most
something and
most
I get the
people are
quote wrong. You know what I
self-taught
mean?
though. I know what you mean, but like most people are that's the sort of beauty of this industry is most people are self-taught because we've got the tools to teach ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? You will find very few people that come into esports already having had the theoretical training. You will not find someone that has gone to media school, for example, that have done producing, go into esports, because why would they? They can work at TV and movies. I
Ew.
would work at TV and movies rather than like and be a producer on like a sports show or whatever, rather than work in esports if I got the proper training already.
I guess I'm an anomaly.
Um,
Holy shit.
um, I mean, each to your own. Like, if you don't enjoy it, you don't enjoy it, right? But like, if you get the like proper training for it, I think that's the more sensible way.
Mhm.
Because all
There's
the
a lot more
people,
positions available for sure.
yeah, right. There's a lot more positions. The pay's better. It's more structured. You have a salary actually. Like, you don't work for yourself, and all that benefit. Um, but with most of the people being self-taught, there's a sort of roughness to it. But those people, the same people, while they're teaching themselves, they will eventually just do the same thing that you're gonna do in college anyway, or at the trade school or whatever,
Yeah, I agree.
just in a roundabout way. They will eventually read what needs to be read, or do what needs to be done. I mean, I can speak for myself as a caster. Again, I do have that background with, having done like debate classes and whatnot in high school, and doing Model United Nations in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have that background of, okay, I know what public speaking is.
Right.
But after the main thing was that after I started this, I got vocal coaching, because you are, in essence, in a roundabout way, you're a voice actor. You use your voice as a medium. Your voice is your moneymaker, so you need to be able to control it. So I had very rudimentary singing and vocal training, just so I can really understand how my voice works and what to do with it in what situation, how to control it, like loudness wise, tone wise, cadence wise, how breathing supports everything, and all that, all the basics that like Taylor Swift would have in her singing lessons, or Sabrina Carpenter, or whoever, or Ed Sheeran. Oi, I disconnected for a bit.
I was wondering what happened. I was like, uh-oh, did I miss something?
When did I cut off?
You said something about
Look.
Shakira or something like that. You're
Okay,
talking about some singers.
yeah, like the basically the same vocal coaching that these very successful singers would have in their early years, I now had, because it's just the professional thing to do, to understand how your voice works if you're making money with your voice. Like, that doesn't mean I'm a voice actor, because quite frankly, I'm not, and I'm not a singer. But you need that rudimentary but formal training still.
Yeah. um, I'm already gonna segue into an ending point, but first of all, I really do agree, and I never really thought about it. A vocal coach. Wow.
Yeah, that's actually stuff that exists. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I know it exists, but like, I never really thought about like. Well, I mean, I guess how else are you supposed to get practice as a caster? You know, besides just actually doing your job and streaming.
I mean, yeah, like when you do vocal coaching, you're not really focusing on the work of like how to improve it. There's casting coaching as well. You can, like, for example, some people do. They ask someone that is more accomplished than them to look at replays, but that's subjective, right?
Right.
Because people have different styles, people have different intonations, people have different preferences and how they like to do things. In simple terms, so the vocal coaching is more formal. Again, and that's the beauty of esports is, and especially for the people that take it seriously, is that they all started self-taught, and they got to a point where they're like, okay, I need the help of a professional. Be that the player that needed the help of a sports psychologist, be it the coach that needed to read the psychology book. Same with the analyst, the camera operator, getting more formal training in the software that they use. Same with the producers, and even event organizers. They're gonna have basic courses of human resources management and business management, because suddenly, if you're an organizer, you need to budget. You need to know how to budget. You need to know how to, well, the basics of proper finance, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, that's kind of a no-brainer.
So in a roundabout way, even though in esports you do it the other way around, you will still get that formal training at some point if you're in it enough.
Of course. Sorry,
Sorry.
phlegm in my throat. Thank you, Cold Iowa Weather. I wanna take this time to thank you a lot for being able to have this conversation with me and do this interview and this Q&A.
Absolutely no worries, mate. Happy to help.
I'm so glad you're one of you who picked up, because you had a lot more that you had to say than anyone else, and brought a lot more perspective to a lot of questions that I asked. And I'm I can't
The
really
problem is you
express
ask the
it.
caster, right? You ask the caster. I like to hear myself talk.
Well, I mean, I
At
asked
the
the
end of it, that's a
caster.
very
I didn't
basic
just.
truth.
Well, I didn't just ask
I
the
like to hear myself
caster.
talk.
As the interview went on, I didn't just ask the caster, but I asked the business professional. Is what I learned, and I didn't know that you were also a university student, mainly focused in a business college too. So
Yeah.
you brought a different perspective that I love to hear about, and that's how the business side of things in esports works. So I'm not gonna lie, I kind of got lucky. Talks gave me information, and you sat down and allowed me to do this interview with you because you had such a great perspective on how things work out in the esports industry.
I mean, I'm just happy to help whenever like people ask me for, especially for university projects, because let's be real, university projects suck, and you're always happy for someone to help.
I
So
mean, it
if I can make,
depends.
yeah, it depends. But like, if I can, if I have the time to help someone out with a uni project, I'm more than happy to.
I appreciate that. It's like I mean, like it depends. Like this is probably one of the most fun projects I've had at university. It's a lot
Mhm.
better than the 12 pages of Spanish I'll be needing to write, or the business presentation I have to give in digital advertising about comedy skits that I've done. But yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh
it feels
shit.
way different because I'm not a big marketing guy. I'm very much a creative person. Yeah, just
Mm.
writing person to person. But again, thank you so much, Fish, for being able to sit down with me and allow me to interview you for such a long amount of time. I really
No worries.
appreciate it. Uh,
Yeah,
it's hard.
I'm
It's hard for me to express
mate.
gratitude when I
It
feel like
was
there's so much to give.
mate. It was a pleasure talking to you. I also, because I like to have this, because again, from my brain, I'm a university student, so I like to look at things like bit scientifically. I'm in my master's course, so
Congrats! Holy hell!
I'm yet to write my bachelor's thesis, but you know, I'm already enrolled in my master's. It's a thing in Germany. Um, So I like to. It's also good for me to take a step back and really think, because in the like day to day, you're not gonna think about this thing, right?
Right.
Or like these questions. So it's actually cool to be able to take a step back and like just think, even an hour before this, just think about this. Okay, what would you say? And like really try to formulate and declot your thoughts towards certain topics. So honestly, I possibly have benefited even more than you did from this. I can't lie.
Yeah, I get to take probably 5 hours total interviews and condense it down into a 7-minute presentation
I
into a
do
YouTube
not
video.
envy your task.
Well,
I'm
no,
very sorry.
it's actually very fun. And before coming to this, I have the script
Mhm.
halfway done.
Aye,
The hard
nice.
part now is figuring out the background footage that I'll be using.
Yeah, fair. And I mean, clip hunting. I guess that's gonna be fun.
Clip hunting is gonna be really fun. It's also kind of awkward to just like use, just hey, here's a green bubble that pops up every time somebody talks.
Mm.
But I don't have a face cam.
I mean, if you need like pictures to animate or something, you can like just ask. I can send you a picture of me that you could just illuminate or animate or whatever.
I wish I had that skill set, but I can. There's a lot of B-roll footage out there. I just gotta be able to probably spend an hour to grab everything I need.
Mate, have a good day.
You too.
See
Have a
ya.
good night. Peace.
Bye.